All right, so you want to grow some plants and you're wondering, what is the one thing that you need to learn about growing plants? Is there a special fertilizer that you need to buy or anything special out there? Some secret sauce that people are holding off from telling you so you're not successful, so you don't grow a lot of plants and become rich? Well, honestly, no. The main thing you need to learn about gardening is water. And in today's episode, I'm going to be showing you the 4 best methods that you can use to water your plants. I'm going to be telling you the pros and the cons of each individual one, because not all methods will work for everybody. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started with method number 1, and that is watering by hand. If I need to explain what this is, you need to pick a different hobby. But anyways, guys, let's go ahead and get started with the pro number 1. It is the easiest method to get started with. Think about a time when you didn't know how to water your plants. Can you even recall a time like that? No, because when you're born with the skill. You know how to use your hands to water your plants with. So you can use a hose, easy, or you can use anything that holds water, a cup, a pitcher, it doesn't really matter. Pro number 2, it is cheap to get started with. Most of you already have a hose or something that holds water to water your plants. Super easy. Number 3, it is fast. You can just pick up a hose and water your plants just like this. Fast and furious, yes. Okay, just like anything else in life, let's talk about the cons. Con number 1, this is gonna be the main one. Now pay attention. When you water your plants by hand, a lot of the times, this is exactly what you guys are gonna do. But the problem with this method like this is, well, you're not going to be able to fully saturate your plants 100%, because what usually happens when you water by hand is a lot of the water will literally just run down the sides of the container, down the bottom. And even though the surface looks wet and you think you water your plant, you really only wet the surface. So if you don't really pay attention, the bottom is going to be dry. If you don't really pay attention, what usually happens is the surface will get wet, the bottom will be dry. You thought you water your plant, you walk away, you live in the desert like I do, and then a few hours later your plant dries and dies. You will swear that you watered your plant, you will call the nursery where you got your tree from, you will blame them for selling you a deceased tree, and the nursery is going to tell you, do you put soil amendments in there? Do you spray your plant with foliar feed? And then you're going to say, no, I did not, and the nursery is going to say, well, that's why your plant died. Because most nurseries don't even know how to grow their own plants. But anyways, this is one of the main cons about hand watering. You're not gonna be, unless you sit there for 30 seconds to a minute, you're not gonna be able to fully make sure that you saturate the potting mix, especially if you go too far in between watering. Because if you do and your soil becomes super dry, it will become hydrophobic and it will actually repel the water. This is gonna be the main con about watering by hand. Con number 2, that is, well, it is wasteful. A lot of the water that you dump on your plants, we actually go on the ground. It's not gonna go inside your containers. And if it does, it's just gonna drain down very quickly. So it is not one of the most water saving methods that you can use. Number 3, it is labor intensive. If you have a lot of plants like I do, a few thousand plants, it's going to take you a very long time to correctly water your plants. Yes, a long time. Before I actually set up my drip irrigation system in here, it took me hours and hours, probably about 6 hours daily, just to water all my plants. And my plants died because, like I said, I didn't fully make sure that each individual pot got fully saturated. And by the time I got done watering, I was done. I didn't feel like going back, and guess what? My plants suffer. So that is hand watering for you guys. If you have a lot of plants, it's not going to be the most efficient method to water your plants. Now let's talk about the next method, and that is drip irrigation system. What is a drip irrigation system? Well, let's go ahead and talk about it. A drip irrigation system consists of 3 components. You're going to have your timer. Your timer is going to tell how often and how long to water. It will send a signal to valves like this right here, and these valves will turn on and off when the timer tells them to. And then when the valves open, the water's gonna get diverted to where your plants are. There are many different ways you can set up a drip irrigation system, but the way I have my system is I have a main line that goes down, and then from that main line, I put a T, and I send the main line in between my containers. And from that main line, I have spaghetti lines that goes directly to all my plants. You can also use a timer that hooks up directly to your faucet, especially if you want to set up a system very quickly with minimal expense. Now that you understand what a drip irrigation system is, let's talk about the pros and the cons. Pro number one, it is one of the most efficient methods to water your plants because the water will go directly to the root system of your plant. Whether your plants are in containers or your plants are in the ground, the water goes directly to the root system. Pro number two, weed control. Since you're only watering your plants and you're not really wasting water and wetting everything else, weeds are not gonna be as much of an issue as watering any other method. Are you gonna get weeds? Of course you are, but it's gonna be a lot less than watering by hand and dumping water everywhere. Pro number three, if the water in your area is expensive, well, it's gonna save you money. Because like I said, the water is going to go directly to the root system of your plants, and by doing so, it's going to save you water, which is going to save you money. Pro number four, well, guess what? You can tell how often and how long to water. And since you don't have to be there to water your plants, you can water as many times as you want for however long. So a lot of my plants right here, they get water for 10 minutes every day, twice a day. But the way, well, actually no, I have some plants I'm watering up to like 4 times daily. So the way it works is, my timer has a cycle, a soak cycle. So what I do is, I water for 2 minutes, then it shuts off for 5 minutes, and then it waters again for 2 minutes, and then it shuts off again for 5 minutes to let the water actually soak into the container instead of running off on the ground. And it does that for 5 cycles. And I can do that because everything is automatic. I don't have to be here to tell the timer or turn the valves on and off. Super easy to do. Okay, just like anything else, let's go ahead and talk about the cons of drip irrigation. Con number one, it requires knowledge, training. Yes, you need to learn how a drip irrigation system works. You need to know some basic plumbing. You need to know how to set up your timer. You need to know how to hook up your timer to the electric. You need to know what the materials are going to be. So yes, it's going to require some homework from you. You need to understand how everything hooks up together to understand how to set one up, or you can simply pay somebody else. But even if you pay somebody else, you still need to understand how to control your timer. Con number two, it is extremely labor intensive. When we set these lines up, it took hours. Actually, it took days, because each individual hole you see in here, it was done by hand. And there's a coupling in there, and you got to push it in there with your fingers. By the end of the day, my fingers were sore for days because it took forever to do this. It takes a very long time to set up, especially if you have a lot of plants. But once it's done, it will save you a lot of time. Something that took me about 6 hours to water daily, and my plants suffered. Now it takes me no time, and all I have to do is just make sure everything is working. Maintenance. It's not a set and forget system, okay? So you're gonna get calcium buildup in your lines. Your drip lines are gonna break. The birds are gonna chew them up, pull them out of the containers. The bunnies are gonna chew your lines. So every week or so, you wanna do maintenance. You wanna walk around and make sure all your drip lines are working. Because if you don't maintain it and you get complacent, well, guess what? Your plant's gonna go without water and it's going to die. So yes, you do have to do maintenance. So it's not a set and forget system, even though it's gonna save you a lot of time. And the next con is, well, it depends on how fancy you wanna go. It's going to cost you some money. If you wanna hire somebody to actually do the drip irrigation system, it's depending on how many plants you have, whether they are in containers or you're doing an irrigation system. Like for my property over here, I did my entire property, everything is on drip. If I had to pay somebody, just to give you a number, easily, at least $5,000 if I had to pay somebody. But I did not, I did it myself. But just to give you an idea, I have a lot of trees in the ground, so it's not something that is common out there. If you only have a few trees, it's gonna be cheaper, but it just depends on how many plants you have. So it could be expensive, really expensive, or it could be a lot cheaper, but it's still gonna cost you a lot more than watering by hand. Method number 3, and that is going to be overhead irrigation. What is overhead irrigation? Well guys, overhead irrigation is exactly what it sounds like. You can either use a sprinkler or you can use this special sprinklers that I use with my plants to water them. What does it do? Well, it just shoots water everywhere, and everything around this radius right here will get overhead water. The water will hit the leaves, then it's gonna drip down into the containers and water your plants. And that is overhead watering. You don't have to use this fancy thing over here. You can use whatever you want. But the idea is the same. So now that you understand what overhead watering is, let's talk about the pros and the cons of overhead water. Pro number 1, it doesn't require special training. You just have to understand the main idea and set up your system. What I have over here, it's just PVC pipe with risers going up, and then I have a sprinkler head on the top hooked up to a timer. Easy, anybody can do this. Pro number 2, fast setup. You can get up and going in just a few minutes. To be honest, this whole thing right here took me less than an hour, and this entire area right here, it's getting water with overhead sprinklers. Very easy to set up, especially if you're not sure what you are going to be doing with your plants. Pro number 3, it will cover a huge area. Depending on the pressure that you have, your water pressure, and depending on the type of sprinklers that you want to use, you can cover an entire area. This area right here is huge, huge. And I only have 4 sprinklers. I have one here, I got one over there, one back on the back side, and one over there in the corner. And all those 4 sprinklers are watering all these plants right here. And I got a few thousand plants in here. It's really not that expensive. Compared to other watering methods, if you only have a few plants or you don't have a big area to water like this, one sprinkler will easily cover an area like the ones that I have up here, easily 20 by 20 or 25 by 25. And that's a lot of plants. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the cons, because not everything in life is perfect. So con number 1, all right, this is going to be the main one, and that is going to be the weeds. Since you are overhead watering, a lot of the water is going to get, well, in areas where you don't want water, and the weeds are going to grow. So that's the main con that I have about the system. It's just weeds. I have to weed eat this area every single week because otherwise they take over my plants. The weeds will grow on the dirt, and I have some fancy weed cloth over here that I spent a lot of money, and it's not even a year old, and look, it's full of weeds. And that is because of the overhead water. Con number 2, well, this system is not that efficient. It will waste a lot of water because you're raining down on your plants, so all the water is just gonna go everywhere. And a lot of the water, I would say at least 50%, if not more of that water, is just gonna go and end up in the soil. It's not gonna even water your plants. Con number 3, if it gets windy. Okay, I said I have 4 sprinklers here, but ideally I need 2 more. I need 2 more right here in the middle, because I've noticed when it gets really windy, the plants that are upwind and the wind comes from that side don't get water. So if I don't pay attention in my area, if the plants go dry, they're dead in one single day. So I have to make sure the plants get watered. And if it's windy in your area, overhead watering may not be that efficient. And the only way you can counter that is by installing more sprinklers. Con number 4. Okay, so this is a sprinkler system. And if you didn't know, sprinklers, well, normally take a lot more pressure than other types of watering systems. So if you have a lot of heads running at the same time, you are going to be losing pressure. So my system that I have here, this is as big as it gets. If I want to expand and make it bigger, I'm gonna have to install another valve just so that way I can water a different area, because they take up a lot of pressure. So you may need several zones to run several areas. Con number 5, and that is, okay, you know this system right here will waste a lot of water. So in order to effectively soak up your containers fully 100%, you're gonna have to run it for a little while. Because remember, you need to oversaturate their canopies and allow the water to drip down into the containers. That takes time. If you only have a few plants and a few canopies catching the water, dropping down from the sprinklers, well, it's gonna take a lot longer. Like my system right here, when I run it about an hour each time, because it takes 1 hour to fully saturate the potting mixes right here. That's a lot of water, and like I said, it takes a long time. And you can see a lot of my plants are very close together, so I'm getting a good, I guess you can call it a catch ratio compared to what's being wasted into the soil. But if you only have a few plants, you may even need to run the system even longer, because otherwise, you know, there's not gonna be as much foliage catching all the water. That brings us to method number 4, and that is flood irrigation. What is flood irrigation? Well, this right here are flood trays. What you do is you put water in them, and whatever you want watered, you just set it in there. What usually happens is your plants, the potting mix, not your plants, will suck up the water from the bottom through capillary action. And once the potting mix is fully saturated with water, well, it will stop taking up the water. And as your plant drinks the water, it will dry the potting mix. And the potting mix will once again soak up the water from the bottom. A lot of people assume your plant is just gonna drink whatever water it needs. No, it doesn't work like that. The way this works is the potting mix will absorb the water until it's fully saturated, and then it will stop. And that's it. That's how the system works. Normally, you need a container that holds water. These are flood trays right here. But you can use a bucket. You can use anything. You can use a bowl. You can use anything that holds water, and you can put your plant in there, and your plant will soak it up from the bottom. The potting mix will soak it up from the bottom. So now that you understand what flood irrigation is, let's talk about the pros and the cons. Pro number 1, this method right here is one of the most efficient methods to water your plants. Because all you got to do is fill up the container with water, and then the potting mix will suck up the water from the bottom. The only time that you're going to lose water here is through evaporation. But that's it. Otherwise, most of the water will actually get taken up by your plant. Pro number 2, this method right here is technically set and forget. You see the plants that I have right here? Well, I don't come very often here. Don't mind this guy right here. But anyways, I don't come very often here. And so I don't get to water my plants every day. So what I do is every other day I come here and I fill up the trays with water, and then the plants will get water, and they'll be good to go for the next 2 days. I don't have to worry about them going dry, because the potting mix will just soak up the water from the bottom. Pro number 3, whatever you put in your flood trays, you know it's going to get watered 100%. I like the flood trays, especially for little containers where I have a lot of containers and I need to water a lot of plants. I just stick them in the containers right here in the flood trays, and I know 100%, as long as they sit on the water, they are going to get watered. So you know your potting mix is going to get covered 100% compared to other watering methods, where if you don't run your system long enough, like with overhead irrigation, or you don't water long enough with your hands, you know, or you don't set your drip system long enough to water your potting mix, then obviously your potting mix is not going to get fully saturated. With this method, as long as you have enough water in the containers, you know your pots are going to get fully saturated. So let's go ahead and talk about the cons. Con number 1, well, it is not cheap. If you have a lot of plants and you actually want to get flood trays, the flood trays can be expensive. Like this big one right here, this is like a 4x8. This one, I don't remember how much I paid, but I can tell you it was over $100 easily. Con number 2, critters. All right, so if you have a lot of flood trays and you keep them outside, well, during the growing season, it's gonna be hot and you're gonna get mosquitoes. So if you don't treat the water for mosquitoes, well, you're gonna get a lot of mosquitoes. You're also gonna get a lot of critters that are gonna come in and try to drink the water. Con number 3, well, you still have to refill them. So it still requires some manual labor. You're still gonna have to come here and fill them by hand. Now you can also automate your system. You can run a combination of a drip system with flood trays, and you can have your drip system fill up the trays and then shut off and then see how long it takes for the trays to dry and then refill them again. What a lot of growers do is they don't like waiting until their plants drink up the water fully. So what they do is once they fill up the tray, they let their plants soak, for 30 minutes to an hour, and then they have a pump that pumps the water back out into a reservoir, and then that way the plants don't stay wet indefinitely. Because a lot of people are going to tell you, oh my God, you're going to overwater your plants. I have not once overwatered any of my plants in flood trays, and even though they stay in the flood trays 24/7 with water, I only do this during the winter time. And that brings us to con number 4, winter. All right, overwatering, if you didn't know, takes months to years to kill your plants. And as long as your plant's actively growing and it's hot, it is extremely hard to overwater your plants. You will not be able to overwater your plant. But if it's winter, your plant's no longer sweating, the evaporation rate is a lot lower, and you're relying on the water to fully be soaked up by your plants in between watering. Well, in the winter, that's going to take a long time. And you don't want your plants to stay wet during the entire winter. So flood trays outside, manually watering them, it's just probably not going to work unless you put a pump in there to suck the water back out, so that way your plants don't sit in the water for weeks on end when it's cold and they're not drinking as much water. Con number 5, it takes up space. I don't know how much space you have, but if you have a lot of plants and they're bigger than this 1 and 4-inch pots, they take up a lot of space because you have to flood an entire area. So I only use the flood trays for my small containers. Sometimes when I have bigger plants, I just put them in these containers, but to water thousands of plants with flood, it's just very difficult. All right, guys, so that is the 4 best methods that you can use to water your plants. Which one works best for you? I don't know. You can decide and choose one or all of them. Here at my nursery, I use all of them, guys. As you can see over here, I have overhead irrigation simply because this is just a temporary area. I don't have anywhere else to put these trees. I know I'm gonna be moving a lot of them. And so I set up my overhead so that way I can get them watered automatically. I don't have to worry about them. And even though everybody's on top of each other in here, they have water, and I know my plants are not gonna die. So that's the reason why I choose overhead over here. But also, I water plants by hand. The ones that are not on drip irrigation, the ones that just are coming in, shipments, I hang water those temporarily. I don't like hang watering, but I still do it. And most of my plants are actually on drip irrigation. And I also use flood, as you guys saw earlier. So it just depends what your needs are. You can decide, you can use all of them, or you can just pick and choose which one you like best. But remember, watering is going to be one of the main things you need to worry about when taking care of plants. And as long as you have your watering down, failing at gardening, it's extremely difficult. Hopefully this video helps you out. If you have any questions that I didn't answer in the video, you can go ahead and comment below. And don't forget to like the video so more people can see what true gardening is about. And as always, I will see you next time.